And we're live. Sweet. Okay. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais.
I'm Remy.
And I'm Maya. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know, of course, we're missing a well-loved voice because he's doing something called a vacation. And he is traveling in an RV around all the awesome countries in the European Union. I think he's also going to France, right?
He usually does.
Yeah, I'm so jealous of his vacations. So completely jealous. Hopefully we'll be able to get some pictures and a blog post out of him to share with all of our listeners.
Yeah, longtime listeners will remember he did this last year too. It's an annual RV road trip. So today we're discussing What Splits Us by Mark Farrington. Listeners should be aware that the story is explicit. If you have children in the room and don't want them to hear an R-rated discussion, pause the podcast and come back later. So Gerald chose this story and then he left us. And I feel like we've been pranked. So it's the story of Bob and Sarah, a new couple in their late 30s who are both teachers at a regional school in rural New England. The relationship develops quickly, and after just one sexual encounter, Sarah asks Bob if he would be willing to try something new, spanking. Bob acquiesces, but both her need to be spanked and his reaction to the spanking trouble him. He wants rules and for things to be explained, but Sarah is more visceral and less restrained. The relationship progresses until one evening, Bob snaps. The spanking escalates and he frightens himself, but not Sarah.
Oh, Gerald. How I love you, Gerald. Yes, I enjoyed this story, but it was cleanly written, and there were parts of the story that were very true to life, but it's missing something for me, and maybe it's because just the act of spanking doesn't seem like enough of a plot. So yeah, I'm kind of torn about the story. Remy, how did you deal with the explicit nature of the story, as you always call it?
Thank you for asking. So I'm going to repeat what I said several episodes before for any of our loyal listeners. And I don't care if it's falling on deaf ears, but I'm going to keep harping on it because it's what I believe. I think we should take choosing stories a little more seriously. And I personally consider it an honor to be presenting a story because it'll be occupying your time and not just your time, but the time of whoever else, is following as well and chooses to read. So when we choose, let's try to dig a little deeper, try a little harder, because our time is limited, and
so yeah. You're making the leap that because it's explicit, because of the nature of the story, that it's not like valid literature.
But you can say anything is literature if it's written down and put up on a website, right? And you can say
yes, but this is a teacher at an MFA program who's well known for his writing.
Right, but let's point out. I'll use your own words. You can't have spanking be a plot of a story unless you're putting it on some website where they have websites for this for people instead of pornography.
Are you telling me about the websites for people that are like this? You're talking to the wrong person.
Not you. I'm speaking to the public now. For people who are not familiar, they have websites where people can go to read this stuff, and that's where a story like this belongs.
Actually, no, because it's too literary for those websites. This story is somewhere in the middle. Okay. And I think that's what's so interesting about it.
Sure.
I feel like it needed to be pushed farther as far as into the characterization of the people involved, but it's somewhere in the middle, and that's what I'm struggling with. Anais,
yes,
dig me out of this hole before I totally out myself.
Okay, so I don't think spanking is the plot. Spanking is a plot device. I think this is one of those where the plot is very, very much intertwined in character. It's the character arc that you see in Bob. That is the story. It's the change that he goes through because of the spanking. So I feel like it didn't have to be spanking. It could have been something else, but it was spanking. And spanking is a pretty good one for reasons we can get into for this particular story. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really well written. I mean, like, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just less squeamish. Like, okay, this may not be my thing personally, but as far as kink goes, come on, this is like entry level. This is like gateway kink. Like
really
this isn't
entry level. This is like, yeah. I'm not even gonna say how old. So here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. My issue with it being used as a plot is that because I have inside knowledge, there is nothing that happens here. It's literally felt like someone took their experience and just wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing that felt pushed out of the boundaries. There was nothing that was, it didn't feel like it was really exploring those emotions on a deeper level. Now, that might be because I've been in the kink community off and on for 2 decades. So when I read this story, I'm reading it a little different, and it doesn't read like fiction to me. And I wanted more fiction. I wanted more character. I wanted to really push that experience and delve into what's going on in the narrator's head as he's going through these changes. And I felt like that was not pushed far enough.
Yeah, but I think you're asking for a different story. So you're asking for a story about a guy who's encountering kink for the first time and explores that and likes it and his role in it, and then it escalates. But I don't think that this is this story.
Not escalates. I feel like the writer pulled his punches, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think what Maya's saying, this is less of a story, more of a journal entry.
Thank you. Yes. That's actually exactly how I felt. I felt like I was reading a journal entry of someone who was brand new to the kink scene and had just had their first experience. Like, that's how it read to me. It didn't really explore that. And this is really fertile ground to explore. And that the reason why it might not have been explored could be twofold. Could be the writer didn't want to out himself. Could be the writer doesn't really know as much about kink as possible. But there's a lot of intense emotions on the side of the top. On, like, when a woman likes kink, there's less of a barrier to entry. Like, men have been conditioned that a lot of the things that the woman wants, if you're talking male top, female bottom, a lot of those things are not socially acceptable. So to get to the point where you can spank your girlfriend and be happy about it, you have to get past this internal monologue of, am I an abuser? Am I a horrible person? What does this mean for me? Does this make me a bad man? And I felt like that's really fertile ground, and he started to touch on it, but then he backed away. And I think that's why it left me flat. That said, I felt like there was nothing in the story that didn't feel true. I felt like it was very delicately written, and the language was clean. Like, the language was so cleanly written for me. So it was just weird, like, okay, I should be enjoying the story, but it's missing something.
Well, I still think maybe...
Did she just freeze for you too, Rami, or is it just me?
Yep.
Okay.
A pretty funny pose.
Yeah, it kind of sucks that she freezes just as she's about ready to make an interesting point.
Maybe friends who hate. So there's all these other things that are going on that has him wound up in such a way where he's like surprised when she doesn't come from an abusive.
Hold on, you have to start.
We didn't hear any of it.
She froze again.
Can you type, because my hand is holding my mic, Rami, and let her know that she's freezing in and out, and to go ahead and log out and log back in.
Yeah, I think that's what she did.
Okay.
I'm surprised that you're calling from your car, but your internet connection's better than hers. Well, she is in Costa Rica. So.
And I have like this crazy 4G like business. Like,
so wait, are you using a laptop or are you using your phone?
I'm using a laptop.
Household. So I think it's
okay. So the reason why you keep seeing the side of my face because I'm looking at you on my laptop.
Yeah.
But
it's a
my
nice
external camera has a better mic that goes to Blab, and then my recording is with my mic and my Tascam, and I got a shorter cord.
What is
so I can
that?
get rid of that super long cord.
What is that thing you're holding?
This is my microphone.
No, the other one.
Goes to the actual. This is my external recorder.
Oh.
This is what I record on, because I don't record on Audacity in case it crashes, and it gives better sound.
All right, she's calling back in. I don't know. Do we need to do something to let her in?
No. She's host, so it should let her in. She's having problems.
Okay.
It's Costa Rica. Give her time.
Okay.
I'm patient.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that we're probably closer together on this than me and Anais.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting conundrum. I was not expecting that, but something about this story really did leave me flat, and I find it very humorous that we're closer together than me and Anais.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like how things work out in the real world, where, especially like in politics and stuff, you see groups that might like they have like differing views, but on certain issues they have different reasons to align. Ally
Exactly.
themselves with each other.
And as I mean, I'll own up. Everyone pretty much has probably already guessed. Yes, I've been a member of the kink community off and on for a very long time, but I'm also fairly conservative and old-fashioned. And so in a lot of ways I do align pretty close with you, Rami. Okay, Anais, it's good to have you back. Now will you repeat that amazing, enlightening point that you were about ready to give us?
Yes. Okay, so I'll just start from the beginning because I don't know where it cut off. I was like a good half minute in. So for me, this story really isn't about the spanking, right? The spanking is just a plot device for the change that happens in Bob. So Bob's this character who's like wound up pretty tight. He had a fairly not physically abusive childhood, or maybe he did. Like, he alludes to his parents were always fighting, always arguing. His mom had said that she'd rather be dead than continue to be in the family. And he's surprised when Sarah's family isn't abusive, yet she wants to be spanked all the time. So I feel like this really isn't about the spanking. What I liked about the story is you're in the point of view of a person who's very broken. Like, it's interesting to see how he wrestles with a family that's functional. Like, he wants to know what all the secrets are. Like, he doesn't believe it's true. How he deals with somebody who might just be into spanking and doesn't need to know why. Like, Sarah, because she isn't as broken, she's fine with saying, I just like it because I like it and I'm fine with that. He keeps needing to unpack this all the time. And then he ends up snapping and being in the point of view of somebody who snaps, as they scare themselves, and they disgust themselves, because he takes it from play to abuse in that moment, was what was more interesting for me, whether it was spanking or whatever else it could have been.
And those parts of the story that you just touched on were the parts that I liked. And that's why I feel torn about this story, because I feel like those parts could have been pushed a little farther. And I do think maybe it's because of my own personal history, but I can see where the writer pulls his punches in the story. And those were punches that didn't need to be pulled. I feel like it was a really interesting premise. I loved his reaction to her functional family being accepted in the first time they have sex in her parents' house. And it's just quiet and delicate. And there's something in that whole little section that was absolutely lovely. And I think that was my favorite part of the whole story. But it still left me flat. Mm-hmm. Rami, how about you? What did you like about the story?
Before you came, I was telling Anais that I think it was well written, but again, there's no way that I would ever suggest for someone to read this story.
Is that just because I didn't finish my sentence.
But I know it is because of...
You don't know what I was going to say. Okay. Is the reason why you wouldn't recommend this story because it left you flat, or is it because of the explicit content?
The second one.
The explicit content. Okay, so I mean, the spanking was described pretty pointedly, but it wasn't described in a prurient way. I didn't feel, but I can see how it could make you feel uncomfortable.
I don't like stories about that sort of stuff. I feel like those topics, like you said, okay, you're pretty conservative, but you have that side of you. I feel like if, no matter how someone is on the outside, their intimate life should be kept private.
But here's the important thing. Okay, as I was growing up, and I know a lot of kids in my situation, literature was the only thing that made us realize that we weren't absolute freaks and that we were normal human beings.
You can still realize.
No, I'm just saying.
If you talk to other people,
these types of stories are important for that reason. So this type of story, I can see a guy who's been faced in the situation, who's struggling with whether or not he's an abuser, reading the story and getting some comfort and some enlightenment from the story. I can see this story as having really good value in that way.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I can't really speak for the author because I don't know what he's doing. But I feel like this isn't a championing story for the
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying for a guy that's struggling with both his identity and his own demons, and whether or not he's a good or a bad person, I feel like reading the story would have some really good lessons in it. I feel like the way he learns how to communicate with her is really good in the story. And that's something that I don't, maybe I'm just not well read enough, but reading a story where a guy goes from not being really able to communicate very well to being able to communicate more fully with a woman, I find value in that.
Yeah. But I still see, so you were saying that it left you feeling flat, and what I thought was, I think there's something about that that's very true, in that my enjoyment of the story was more cerebral than emotional. I don't think I was like sucked into it and like waiting for the next line. I was more like, oh, that's an interesting point of view. Ooh, I like being in that type of character's head. Or I like what you said with these like few words. Like one of my first notes was when he described Sarah's underwear as being yellow with purple flowers and this woman's pushing 40. It says so much about who she is as a person. Like you get a clear picture of her character. So my enjoyment of it, all my little like moments of like excitement were purely cerebral.
And I think that's what I've been trying to figure out. And I think you just put the nail on the head. I think what I'm missing from the story is the emotional content, because what he's going through is very emotional and I didn't feel any of his emotions.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I wanted to feel his emotions of when he meets the family. I wanted to feel his emotions when he loses control. Like that's a ton of emotions. I didn't feel any of those, even at the points where I feel like were the most potential for having emotional involvement. I felt very distant in this story.
Because again, I think that speaks to how it was written in a way where he's just like cataloging the events and maybe saying, okay, it made me uncomfortable, but I did it anyway and stuff like that. So.
I wonder if this is possibly, this is just me spitballing, I have no evidence for this, but I wonder if this is maybe one of the downsides of when language is very, very clean. So there is no extra word in this story, but sometimes the extra word, sometimes that loose adverb or that little phrase that everybody says guides the reader into how they should feel. Like there's a reason why some type of genre literature is like really good at making you feel stuff. And I think it's because they're hitting on all the cultural cues of like, when you see this phrase, feel this, when you see this word, feel this, that this doesn't have. This is very sort of like sterile.
You know what? That is a great point, because the writer is a teacher. He teaches writing. It's very cleanly written. It's one of the cleanest stories I've read. But you're right. The writing it's detached to me.
It's like really impressive in a brain way, but not in a heart way.
But that's why
when you compare that, I just finished The Yoga of Max's Discontent. And there are parts of that book that are not written clean at all, that are extremely emotional. And I think you're right. The writing rushes when you're feeling rushed. The writing slows down when you're feeling sad. There's a difference in speed. I also felt like, how you're always talking about the ups and the downs as far as speed and emotion. I didn't feel any of that in the story either.
Mm-hmm. All right, you know how we on this show we take issue with the description of something as competently written. Mm-hmm. I don't like describing things as clean either, because it implies that other types that are more detailed or something are dirty in comparison. But I think, remember when
it's so black and white.
Yeah, because I mean you could say it's succinct, but anyway, what I wanted to say is, remember when we would discuss the stories that were written eons ago, much older, and how we were saying how these stories, people couldn't get away with writing, like Yellow Wallpaper, people couldn't get away with writing this way today because of all this MFA structure and all that. So I don't think we should hold that as like the epitome that people should aspire to. I think writing, you know, when you're very skilled, it should come naturally, and even if it's not, I don't know, like clean, like you would say.
Well, when I say clean, that isn't a qualitative judgment. I actually mean something very specific when I say clean. What do you mean when you say a story is written cleanly, Annie?
It's sort of like every single word has a purpose. It's sparse. Instead of taking, you know, a whole paragraph to describe a scene, you can do it in a word, or you can do it with a symbol, and everybody knows what you mean.
But sometimes that paragraph adds a lot to the story.
That's what I'm saying.
That's why we're saying clean is not a qualitative judgment. Yeah, but clean is a description. And I was wondering, because I've been using that word and we've never actually talked about what that word means. And remember, we had the same conversation about what competently written meant. And I feel like competently written does not apply to this the way we use it. I feel like clean applies because, like you said, every sentence, when you read it, like there's no extraneous words. Every word has a purpose. All the commas and the periods in the right place. When you read it, it feels kind of like fresh air. Like the language feels like fresh air to me when I read this. And I think that's what I mean when I mean clean. But for me, clean, you're right. Having something that is so clean, that is so sparse, that is so just doesn't allow for a lot of emotionality.
Yeah, because the part where he tries to flee the house, I felt like there was such an opportunity there to kind of slow that down a little bit and really feel his fear. But I didn't quite, like, it was rushed. Like all of a sudden he's back in the house and she's forgiven him and it's done. Okay.
Yeah, the pace didn't really vary. It was just, that should have slowed down, and there were other places that should have sped up for me. The whole scene where he loses control, there's like a sense, it's like a car wreck when you're in that kind of situation, and time kind of slows down and then speeds up and slows down, and that could have been used to create more emotion and to vary the tone. It could have been used to great benefit in that particular scene, and it was completely ignored. Again, it had like more of like a constant speed.
Yeah. But I still feel like we're harping on a lot of the negative stuff because it is there. Like, it's not going to get like a great score when we come to rating. But I do really, really like being in the point of view of the person who snaps. Like, I wish you would have slowed down, but because the thing is, like, when you put yourself in someone's point of view, you're much more likely to like that person, even if you wouldn't have if they were not the point of view character. Like, if they were somebody else, like, you wouldn't have liked them as much. But then once you're in their point of view, you understand their motives and you're more forgiving. This guy, you still dislike him. At least I did. I still dislike him. And I still kind of, I mean, I don't think he's a bad guy.
I didn't dislike him, but I wouldn't date him. I felt like he was kind of wimpy.
Yeah, because of a lifetime of abuse. He was kind of wimpy because
he was kind of wimpy.
Yeah. He was the kind of like injured wimpy animal that like lashes out if you touch it or something. I mean, he was very,
and he was in the wrong position. Like frankly, she should have been spanking him.
Work out his mommy issues.
The wrong top.
Yeah, some pretty serious mommy issues.
But he had so many issues and he was so uncomfortable with what he was doing, and that was something else I felt like would have been interesting, is she was really pushing this on him in a way that was not complete, in a way that was manipulative, not completely consensual. And it was, I felt like in the story it was just accepted as okay. and I have huge, like, these are my moral biases coming through. Okay, this is me turning into Rami for a moment.
Oh boy.
I have problems with stories that touch on kink and BDSM that completely ignore consent issues and the fact that consent goes both ways in these types of relationships. And in this relationship, I found some of the things she did bordering on abusive.
When she was really pushing him at the end, I was a little bit like,
it was really uncomfortable, you know.
Yeah.
And when she's talking him into doing things that he's not comfortable with yet, you know, and they never had that conversation where, you know, he comes around and he understands and he wants to do it. Like that his consent was never a consideration. It was always, you're going to do this to me. I want to do it. Why do you want this done to you? Is it okay if I do this to you? Like nowhere on this story was there a consideration of, do you want to spank her? And I felt like that made me very uncomfortable in the story.
Yeah. Though I sometimes felt like Sarah felt a little unreal in some ways. Like, I felt like Bob was very well drawn. Huh?
Like a plot device?
A little bit. Like, I think it was more towards the end. I was sort of fine with her up until he snaps, and then he comes back in, and she's like, I'm just going to climb on top of you now. Like, really? Like, even, I feel like there was definitely a shift in how he spanked her, and given her upbringing and her background, I'm totally okay. Like, I totally believe she would be into spanking just because it's fun and she likes the feel of it. But then when it shifts to the abusive part of it, because the language is that he's trying to beat out of her the need to be spanked. Like, there's a shift in how he's doing it. How come that doesn't scare her at all, even a little bit?
I don't think it would scare her. But I think, and this is in a realistic scenario, submissive would have turned to him and been like, are you okay? Like, she would have been concerned about whether or not he was okay.
Clearly not. Like, he ran out.
Gone into like caretaking mode, because when you lose control like that, there's going to be a heavy bottom when he wakes up. Like, I like the fact that afterwards he cried. Like, that's realistic. But her response to him was not, you're right, she wasn't well drawn. I didn't really get a feel for her personality, and she came off kind of selfish. And I felt like, A, his consent didn't matter to her, and B, when he lost control, there was no care and concern for how he's coping. Jumping on him isn't going to solve that. Unfortunately, I've seen that situation firsthand, and you ask whether or not they're okay, and they're kind of freaking out. And that was completely ignored. It felt very sanitized.
Yeah, and also, like, she was very kind of like mousy, right? The Marianne type next door, which I like, which is fine. It kind of adds to the whole like teacher with the kink, like that thing's happening. But it was like sometimes her
wrong with her. She was perfect. She was a Pollyanna.
Yeah, and there was something about her childishness.
Sure, yeah.
That was a little off-putting sometimes. I think the underwear for me, for some reason, I got like a real reaction, like the yellow with purple flowers. Like, I'm like, okay, I totally believe that type of woman exists, and that's fine. But it's still got this weird sort of like,
you don't want to see.
I don't understand. Yeah, like
you don't understand that woman. I felt very similar, and it's good that you put a really fine point on that, because I think part of the reason. A lot of my issues with the story could have been solved with better characterization of her.
Yeah. But I do like what he did with him, though. So
yeah, I he was an interesting guy. I just felt like he could have been pushed more. Frankly, my issue with the story has nothing to do with the plot of the story or the idea of the story. I just feel like it could have. I felt like the writer didn't take any risks, that the writer did not push. And if you're gonna write a story like this, in order to make it good, you gotta rip off the band-aid and be real. And to me, the story didn't feel like viscerally real. Like logically, like I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, this makes sense. He's done his research. But all the visual emotional stuff is completely left out, and a lot of that could have been put in there by having a really strong female character, having her much better drawn. Give her a fault. Get me into her emotions. Or if you don't want to do that, show her character by how she's responding to him a little more clearly, rather than just making her this selfish, perfect girl next door who has a perfect family who likes spanking on the side.
As we discuss this story, I keep thinking of Queenie by Alice Munro. Completely different story. But I keep wondering, Queenie, okay, it's a lot longer, but it's also cleanly written. Like, nothing feels a little like it's drawn out too long, or
There's
like
a
that
lot
description
more
on
variety in Queenie, though.
But so I'm saying, like, but emotionally, there was, I had more reactions to what the characters were doing and what was going on, and I felt more. And part of me wants to, like, compare these two side by side and be like, what is she doing with language that this guy's not? Because it's not that this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like, this is still very well written. I like the metaphors that he chose. The whole thing with play as a t-shirt getting a stain, like, that got a reaction out of me. But again, a cerebral one. I think what I wrote down was like, this guy needs to chill about the spanking. It is not a t-shirt. Like the whole play thing, he's very black and white. But
it was like the simplest things were like revelations. I find it interesting that you want to compare Queenie, because this is something that I didn't say during that show, but the relationship between the main character and the man was definite power exchange. And I think there is a parallel to be drawn in Queenie, because the main character goes through a lot of internal conflict and stuff as she's finding herself attracted to this man. It's kind of the flip side of this story, where he's doing the same kind of thing. But in Queenie, it was a longer story, but even if it had been shorter, there was a lot more variety. There was a lot more emotion going on in the main character's head. Now, part of that may be because the main character in that story is a female. A lot of times people feel a little bit more at ease writing that way when you're talking about a female character. Men have emotions too. They just may not share them, but they still have them. And since we're in his head, that would have been a really great time to get more of his emotions. Also, Alice Munro takes a lot of risks. Like, she pushes her stories. She does things in her stories that surprise you, things that make you cringe, things that may not be quote unquote okay. And she just does them with abandon, and she just doesn't care. And she doesn't pull punches. And that's what this story is lacking for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the other issues also with sometimes writing so sparsely is I feel like you have very successfully given me the thing that you want to say. I get it. Or maybe I don't. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Maybe there's a whole other piece of the iceberg that I'm not getting. And then maybe writing too sparsely is a problem. But
I wish Gerald was here, because I actually think he would have, I don't know, maybe he would have agreed with us, but maybe it would have been interesting to have heard his opinion on this too. I wonder if he would have had the same issues we had or different issues. I have an inkling that maybe his issues would have been different ones.
Yeah. The thing is, like, you keep saying that the author pulled his punches, and I don't feel that. I just feel like there's a lack of emotionality going on, because I feel like having the character snap and run out. I wish he would have left instead of come right back in. That's the only thing. Like, I wish that, because it would have pushed Sarah to maybe
do something.
Yeah, do something, Sarah. Like, yeah, she just sort of is not passively. She just kind of, maybe she knows that she has him wrapped around her finger.
You know how I feel about the story? This is going to sound really bad. I'm probably going to get hate mail. You feel free to send hate mail to mail@literaryroadhouse.com. I feel like the writer was like, I'm going to write, I have this idea about this story, and I'm going to use BDSM or spanking, but that's really controversial, so I have to make the rest of the story not controversial so that, like, I can keep my job and don't piss people off. Like, that's kind of how I felt as I read this story. Remy?
I'll pull back from that and be like, I don't think that's how it went down.
Remy, how did you feel as you were reading
Perhaps.
this?
I mean, it's very difficult to try to ascribe our own motivations to the writer, but But
No,
it's
I don't think so.
polished, but it's trying to talk about a very visceral kind of thing in a polished way, and that's where the contention is, or the
Well, yeah, I mean,
this story.
yeah, I was gonna say I don't think that's what happened. I think like if you're gonna write this story about this guy who's wound up type and it has to do with an abusive childhood and then he snaps, I think bringing into his life something that has to do with spanking or some kind of abuse is kind of the best choice.
Okay.
Right? Like, you know, how else are you going to bring this up to him when he's an adult? And let's not forget that when the story started, one of the first things that was said was Sarah's been in a long-term relationship before. This guy hasn't. Like, this guy has got his issues. Like, how do you get to almost 40 and your longest relationship is 5 months? Like that, you know, it can happen. Some people are not very, you know, romantic or don't feel the need to partner up or pair, but it doesn't sound like that's the case with him. It sounds like it's a symptom
He's just
of
bad
something.
at it.
He's broken.
I hate to say broken, but I think you can be bad at relationships and not be broken. I think he has potential. He's a fixer-upper.
I think he can work through all this baggage that he brings into the relationship with him. And also, Sarah's really bad at like noticing this or just doesn't care. Again, Sarah needs to be better drawn because like, do you not notice that this guy has a ton of issues, or you notice and you don't care?
And you know what? I feel like her, when he invites her out to dinner, she's like, oh, you don't have to do that. Like, she is just like sex focused, like sex and spanking. Like, you don't hear any conversations really about her dreams or, you know, aspirations, or I know this is not the point of the story, but the point is she's not like a full person. She's like this like fantasy girl that doesn't really exist to me. like she doesn't strike me as a real woman that would be into this type of thing. And
I want to read out. So on the live chat we have listeners, and we should like. So a listener, Gabriel, he wrote that to him, the way he felt about the story is like the opposite of what I'm saying. For him, the writer used a veneer of emotional introspection to dress up a piece of dreary erotica. The BDSM gimmick is the only thing keeping the reader involved. Meanwhile, I feel the opposite. I don't care about the BDSM. I'm into the emotional introspection.
You know, it's funny that he said that, and I was already thinking this is, okay, this story has issues, but it's written so cleanly, and it's leaving us just totally blah. You know what is the complete opposite of the story? 50 Shades of Grey. It is written so badly, and it didn't translate so many women because it was all emotional, and it was so guttural, and it was so bad.
Yeah.
Like, can't we have like a real, if you're gonna write about BDSM, A, do it well, okay? B, get into the emotions, be real. Don't write about it if you're not going to take the emotional risks of really ripping the band-aid off and showing the emotions of those characters, or make it a side thing that to a different plot. You know, the plot revolves around him learning to accept her spanking. The spanking could have still been there, but there could have been a different plot that would have led to the same trajectory, the same emotional trajectory that maybe would have pulled you in a little deeper.
Yeah.
But now I'm nitpicking, aren't I?
No, I think it's fair. Plus, I'm at the point where like this is one of those stories again where it feels like there's only so much I can say. And again, I don't know if it's because I'm missing
only
something.
So much. We're at like 39 minutes.
I know. I mean, basically, I'm ready to rate, is what I'm saying.
I wanted to like this story because it was so cleanly written, and it's a topic like to have a BDSM story that is not written badly, and that has like a male character that's struggling with accepting the situation. Like, those are things I want to see in this type of fiction. I want to see more stories about, you know, those internal dialogues that happen. To be faced with a story that could be one of those stories, one of those few, and then have it fall flat just hurt my heart.
Yeah. Although I will say, actually, there's one more thing I can add. When we started this discussion, you said that it didn't feel like fiction. It felt like someone's journal entry. And that's what Carve is always looking for. Carve always hits the money with that. Like,
Yeah, but if you've read actual people's journal entries, they tend to have a little more emotion.
Yeah.
Like, like this felt like the recipe. This felt like the Penthouse Forum letter that was like, and then we went here, and then she did this, and then I did this, and then I thought this, and then I went here, and then I went this. You know, if you're on FetLife and you're reading someone's journal entry, it's all about, and then this happened, and then I felt this, and how does this mean? And, you know, we tend to be a lot more emotional. Humans are emotional creatures, very emotional creatures. And men in the kink community tend to express their emotions more than just men at large, that from what I've seen, just because it's required. So, you know, to have that completely left out, just dreary. I think that's a great word for it. But not dreary in like a oh, it's horrible, but dreary in like that, like, you know, wake up in London and it's foggy and there's lots of like mist in the air kind of dreary to me. Did you guys see any symbolism in the story? I tried to pick up some symbolism and I didn't pick up any. I would think with being an MFA and as cleanly written as it was, the technicality of how it was written, I was surprised that I didn't pick up on any symbolic elements.
Yeah, I mean, no, not really. Or maybe I just wasn't looking out for it. Like I was looking for other stuff. But yeah, he kind of just said what everything was and spelled out the metaphors in a way that I thought was absolutely, you know, like good, direct. Like that's his style.
Yeah. Remy, did you spot any symbolism?
No, wasn't looking for it. I'm ready to
You weren't looking for it. You were just annoyed that Drill picked this.
Let me know whenever you're ready to rate.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Annie, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. You know, I wanted to give this a 4, and the more we talked, the more I realized I really didn't like this story. I gotta give it a 3. I'm giving it a 3, and it's a push. Neutral. I'm giving it a 3 for effort.
3 is neutral.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. I just felt kind of disappointed.
Yeah. Let me take the scale more on the negative side. I'll go 0.5.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, come on.
0.5 because
last time you gave it 0.5, it was
it's the lowest
bad, okay?
I can't give
like,
0.
you see no redeeming value in this story at all.
It's not, I would never recommend it to someone. So if me giving it any higher means that I would.
You might recommend it to a person.
All right. I'm giving it a 4. I liked it more than I disliked it, but again, there was no ups and downs, the things I always like, the emotional side of it. It was purely cerebral, but I still feel like I learned stuff and I like the point of view. I like what he was experimenting with, so I'm giving it a 4.
All right. What's the game?
Oh, okay,
let's first.
Yeah, we have to get ready for the games. I am pulling a story from the Atlantic. I was gonna pick at random, and then I picked at random. I read the first sentence. I thought, Rami will kill me.
Thanks for thinking of me.
You know, we've had so many of these stories all in a row. I'm like, what is up? Is there like something in the zeitgeist that all the writers are getting their like smut published suddenly all at the same time?
Like Gabriel said, it could possibly be a gimmick, and it is a gimmick.
I think it's just in the air, like, you know, there's something going on. So I deliberately picked a different story just because I was like, no. The story I'm picking is called Hex Keys. It's in the Atlantic. It's written by George Singleton. It's from the 2015 January-February edition.
Cool. And mine is Harrison Bergeron, same as last week, by Kurt Vonnegut Jr.
Oh, good. I want Vonnegut.
Hi, Gail.
If this is like Vonnegut's one smut, it's not because you can.
That would be really funny if he accidentally picked like the one smutty story Vonnegut wrote. I think I might just like die.
Okay, So for the game, I didn't know what to make it about, but hey, I found it because the internet has everything. Okay,
The internet has everything.
it has everything. There's a wiki I found called spankingart.org. Its logo is pink butt cheeks. So they have a list of mainstream movies with spanking in it. So I'm gonna give you a mainstream movie title, and you have to tell me if it has a spanking scene or not.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Rami,
Who's
we'll
gonna
start
go
with
first?
you. Wait.
Remy? Okay.
No, but then there's an easy one for Maya. It doesn't matter. Rami, True Grit.
That's a movie?
Yeah, with Josh Brolin and yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it does. Maya, this is a gimme. Secretary.
What, secretary?
Yeah. The gimme. The secretary has spanking.
I can't believe that just happened. Yes.
Yes.
I actually went on a first date to that movie.
Rami. I'm remembering Rami and I watching
That was
Girl
really
with the
funny.
Dragon Tattoo. Rami. Bridge of Spies.
No.
No, it does not have a spanking scene. Maya, Kill Bill Volume 1.
No, I never saw Kill Bill. I'm gonna say yes.
Yes.
That director
Rami.
seems to have spanking.
Yeah. Rami, Step Brothers, the Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly comedy.
Yes.
Yes, it does. Maya, Dragon Ball Z, Battle of the Gods.
Okay, it's a kids movie, but it's Japanese. I'm gonna say yes.
Yes, it does.
Did you like how my logic went?
Hmm.
It is Japanese. I'm gonna go with yes.
Go with yes.
That was horrible.
To see the full list, go to spankingart.org. Okay, Maya. So, what are we reading?
Oh, I won. That was it.
You won.
Wait,
Yeah, that
how?
was it.
No, it's
Okay,
a
well, that
tie.
was a
I didn't get one wrong either.
Yeah, you did. You got wait.
Yeah, you got one wrong.
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Didn't
No.
you say Step Brothers no and it was yes or something?
No, I said yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, fine. Rami, it's
Thank
tied.
you. It didn't
My
feel like
tiebreaker. Yeah. My tiebreaker is pretty lame, but I didn't know what else to do. Spankingart.org, the wiki. How many articles does it have? It's in the thousands. Closest.
5,000.
Oh, more than that. You said it's spanking.org?
Spanking art, but it's like hardly anyone knows about it. And it's literally like pictures, movies. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not like
It's not like a
archive of,
fetish
like, the
community.
BBS, like boards or something.
No. It's like, yeah.
I'm gonna say 8,000.
Rami's closest. It's 3,727.
Oh, it's a tiny site.
But there's a lot of visual arts there, if anyone's curious. There.
A lot of visual arts.
So we're reading Vonnegut's instead.
It's
I'm
not.
glad. I want to read some Vonnegut.
Okay.
I hope that there's a big, juicy, explicit scene like square in the middle of it just for you, Remy.
How can I do this if I'm the one encouraging you all to do some more vetting?
Okay, but Rami, didn't you pick the last Hemingway story and then there was like one sex scene in it and you were like, oh, it's too much?
Yes.
Those are my standards. But I mean, it's still too much. That's still nothing in comparison to this.
What?
It's true. No, it's true.
Yeah.
Actually, when I started reading this and I saw it was spanking, the thing that ran through my mind was Lady Gaga's Until It Happens to You to Gerald, because it happened to me with Delira and everyone was laughing until it happens to you, Gerald.
See, my first thought was, oh, Rami. Like literally that's the thought when it got to that. I was like, oh.
It started out innocent and then just very quickly fell apart.
It was not innocent for very long, was it?
No. Okay, so Rami, what are we reading?
Harrison Bergeron. I still not sure how to pronounce this name. Bergeron.
Okay,
Yeah.
by Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes, by Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay, but before you go, let us know what you thought of this kinky story at literaryroadhouse.com. Also, is it too soon in our relationship to say that if you don't leave a review for us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker, we'll have to spank you. If it is too soon, that's cool. Let's go on to a few more podcast dates, ideally at our other shows, the Literary Roadhouse Book Club and the Bradbury Challenge. Taking you out on all these podcast dates is pricey, though, so if you enjoy our time together and want some more, please visit patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse to help us cover our expenses. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with your friends, even the kinky ones. Until next time, read a good story.
Is it too soon?